I'm joined today by my friend Jack Posobiec. We're going to talk about the dumpster fire of Kamala Harris on Brett Baer last night and the constant attacks on Donald Trump. Not just hard questions, Jack, like Brett was giving her, but actual bullets, hitting your body, being aimed at you. And you got a book coming out, Bulletproof. We'll talk about that later. But what's your initial thoughts on Kamala last night?
Yeah, well, I mean, thanks again for having me on, Taylor, and just say hi to your audience. And we're always listening to the Taylor Marshall Show and the Posobiec household. So your voice is one that is well known to my family and to my kids. And it's watching that interview. The one thing that I would slightly alter from what you just said, I don't think these were hard questions at all. Because look, I've been in those, campus events where the kids come up to you and they want to do the gotcha things and,
Right.
oh, gotcha. Why did Donald Trump say this on what time and this day? And you're like trying to figure out what the context was or, some kind of thing, or they come up and they clearly have, well researched something and they've got like a specific, question they want to ask. And you're like, look, I don't know all the specifics of, the leader of this group at this time or whatever, that you're trying to get me on. These weren't that at all. What Brett Baer gave her were the most baseline, obvious questions that you would get from a conservative audience going to question a candidate who's running as a Democrat, who, by the way, is the current vice president of the United States. What's going on with the border? What are your policies for the border? Why have you enacted these policies? Will you continue these policies? Again, these are just basic, standard questions. And I think what he did that was different that you haven't seen her deal with before, really, since she's taken office, is the fact that and I'll give him credit for this, and Brett Baer is not my favorite interviewer, but what he did here was he went and didn't take the sort of fake word salad filibuster as an answer. She does, well, we need to work hard for all Americans. He's like, no, no, no. I asked you a specific question. Answer the question. We deal with a lot of issues in this world, and it's a big world that we're focused on. And then whenever he did push her on that, what did you see? You never saw her once take accountability or responsibility for any of the things that have happened since she took office. I looked this up, by the way, 1,366 days ago. Not one shred of accountability, not one shred of responsibility. It was always just Donald Trump's fault. It's Donald Trump's fault that the border is the way it is. It's Donald Trump's fault that there's problems in our country. And then he just, as mentions the basic follow up, well, Donald Trump isn't in office. You say you want a new way forward. You say you want to turn the page, but you're the one who's currently in office. And clearly, this is a walking contradiction in terms where you're saying that you want a new way forward, yet your administration is the current government. And you notice, by the way, the entire corporate media prior to this interview has been letting her get away with this by saying the biggest lie out there right now is that she is not the one who's in office right now. And so she'll say things like, oh, we need to fix the border. We need to fix inflation. We need to fix the grocery prices. Things are going badly. Bill Clinton was out there the other day and said something like, oh, well, Lake and Riley would not have been raped brutally, by the way, raped and murdered down in Georgia if the immigrants and the migrants had been vetted. It's like, I completely agree with you, Bill Clinton. I couldn't agree more. And what you actually saw throughout this interview was number one, this pathological refusal to take responsibility for any of the things that have happened. Even when he asks her, just on a basic level, would you like to offer an apology to the mother of Jocelyn Nungary, this 12-year-old girl who was brutally raped and murdered by these two members of Tren de Aragua there in the Houston area? I think it happened earlier this year. And she wouldn't do it. She said, I'm sorry that happened. Well, I'm sorry that happened. This happened on your watch. And by the way, I think this is something that had she actually taken responsibility, had she actually taken some leadership, shown some leadership there, taken some responsibility for the things that happened in the course of your administration, it would have given her a little bit of respect. It would have won her some points, perhaps with the conservative audience, with the Fox News audience, to say, at least she can take accountability for things that have happened, but she didn't. And we saw this with Afghanistan, then the fall of Kabul. We saw this with the border. We've seen this with Hurricane Helene and the hundreds of people that have died out there that, of course, you know, the media doesn't even want to talk about. You see little kids and they're finding just horrific stories of people being found that couldn't make it out in time, stuff that, you know, I frankly don't even want to post them. Sometimes these stories are so bad. And then what happens afterwards is Tony Blinken goes up and announces another $425 million for Ukraine. So anyway, the refusal to take accountability was a huge issue. And then this anger and this nastiness with which he responds to Brett Baier, snaps at him, cuts him off, body language off the charts. And
the pointing, I mean,
interrogation cell.
You know, I used to be a pastor. I've done a lot of public speaking.
Like,
you've done a lot of public speaking. Pointing at people is what they teach you in like oratory 101. You can reserve it for certain things, but it universally creates a negative emotion in your audience when you do this. Fists are okay, hands are okay, but when you start doing this, that people feel like you're touching them, right? That's what you're communicating. And she was doing that a lot, especially when Brett got her. She was this. And I think
you actually saw her lip
gums
kind of flared up at one point, you know, showed the gums, you know,
yeah.
Brett, and then saying his name, Brett, spitting his name out the way she was. And again, this was 25 minutes of a high pressure interview. And you compared that with, say, and you know, even if you don't like, if you're not someone who's not a conservative or Republican, or you're not supporting Trump and bans and et cetera, okay, fine. But we're just talking style here. Compare that to when J.D. Vance is in one of these interviews, which he's, you know, made sort of a mainstay of his campaign, where he goes every single Sunday morning, he goes adversarial interviews, and he does something a little different that Trump does. And I was with him at one of these in Reading, Pennsylvania, I guess last weekend, so a couple of days ago and Saturday, where he has these sort of rally/press conferences where he's surrounded by a group of supporters, but then he'll also take questions from press and these adversarial questions. And he's always affable about it. He's always laughing. It's sort of more like, oh, Margaret, come on. You know, and he does this sort of thing where he's like, let me set you straight on that. All right. I think you got some issues with your premise there. And let me just show you what it's really all about. And so he's able to use humor. He's able to use that light, pleasant conversation as a way of bringing the audience along to their side. He disagrees, and of course vehemently disagrees, but he does so without snapping, without getting angry. She's running to be the president of the United States, the leader of the free world. And oh, by the way, remember, Taylor, this interview, the intention, right? Politics is addition, not subtraction. So what was the goal of this interview? The goal of this interview was men. The goal of this interview was to bring men on board. And I just got to say that having a meltdown, being shrill, being nasty like that, that is, you know, there's a lot of subtext there that I think the guys out there watching are saying, this is not somebody that I want to be dealing with for the next 4 to 8 years. No, thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Jack, your audio is a bit low. I've got you maxed out. If there's any way you can increase a little bit, that'd be great. People are saying they're having a little bit of hard time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, let me see. I see we're on Zoom. So let me
yeah, it might be down on your
audio
Zoom
settings. Oh, yeah. Hey, is that any better?
There you go. Crank it up.
Is that any better?
Yeah, it's better.
Cranked all the way up, and I can get the microphone up a little bit.
These go to 11.
Because we want people to be able to hear me. Yes, it goes to 11. Is that good there?
That's great. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I watched it, and I was just, you know, it's kind of like her handlers say, okay, you gotta win the male vote. All right. So she's like, okay, I'll be a angry, cranky, mean, finger waving Karen who's demanding to see the manager, and then shows up late, leaves early. I mean, the hostility, the angry eyes. There was a certain point, I can't remember which question it was. You might remember it, Jack, where you can just kind of see her brain deflate. It might have been on the immigration one. And she's trying to remember.
You're going to have to narrow it down. I think there's a few of those.
Yeah, she's recalling a script, and
exactly.
it's just fumbling.
Right. And what you saw was her brain went into scramble mode. And so that was the flight or fight response.
Right.
And she was telling herself, "Hey, I need to, I'm being combated here. There is a threat. I need to get defensive." You saw her get defensive. The crossing of the arms, the leaning back. By the way, those are all defensive postures. And then all of a sudden, you see her scrambling to try to find the script that I guess she didn't have the
Yeah.
benefit of the earpiece that she certainly did.
Yeah.
People have
Her
thought that
magic
she may have
earring.
had perhaps on this Breakfast Club interview, or these magic earrings that we've seen. There's a piece, by the way. There's a clip that's going around. Still Boneless has it up on X from that Breakfast Club Charlemagne interview where she's sort of like poking herself in her ear. And you can't even see it, but I've got
Yeah.
one of those earpieces in right now. You can kind of see it there when I
Yeah.
turn. That does the same thing. So it happens all the time. You go like this, you pop it right in. And I'm like, I do that every single day. I know exactly what that hand motion is. She's pushing in an earpiece. Now, I mean, could it be an earpiece to listen to the interview? I don't know, but it's definitely an interesting maneuver. But yeah, she goes to this sort of pre-scripted answer in her head, and she can't get there. So what does she do? She goes back to blaming Donald Trump. Well, this is Trump's fault. This is, Donald Trump's fault. And again, it goes back to the pathology. And it reminded me of, and I know we're in kind of Halloween mode here. And by the way, shout out to our interview on Halloween from 2 years ago, receiving an award going into the Christian and the Catholic origins of Halloween. People should go check that out. And but we've been watching the Psycho movies, and it reminds me of Norman Bates when the psychiatrist is sitting there with him at the end of the movie saying, "No, no, Norman, your mother's dead. You killed your mother all those years ago. You're the one who committed all these murders. She didn't do it. No, it was her. It was my mother. Mother did those things. Mother did it." And it's like, "No, Norman, you're the one with the bloody knife. You're the one who did all these things." "No, no, 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 no. It was mother." And everybody knows a boy's best friend is his mother, And it just reminded me of that, where she started saying over and over that it's been 10 years of Donald Trump. And it's like, you're in office. You are currently there. These things happened on your watch. And I do actually think that she kind of had this sort of mental block over it, where just like a lot of the other viewers on CNN, a lot of these pundits that you see up there as well, they will act as if we're living, quote unquote, in the Trump era, even though, as we've all seen, he's not been in office for almost 4 full years. And you see the sycophants, by the way, on CNN. You see them on X as well. "Oh, she was combative." The media is using this word. Elon Musk put it out, saying, "Oh, it's testy. It was just testy. It was just a testy interview, just testy right there." And I gotta say, if Brett Baer is too hard of an interview for you, that's too high of a bar, then what happens when you get into the room with like Xi Jinping of China, or Vladimir
Right.
Putin of Russia, or you're dealing with the North Koreans and Kim Jong-un, or the mullahs of Iran, or the cartels, or any one of these things that are out there in the world? This guy he's a TV anchor. And if you can't deal with this guy without having a meltdown, are you really the type of person who has the temperament? They talk about Trump's temperament all the time. Well, what about the temperament that she showed in this interview, not being able to just answer basic questions after 25 minutes? I thought it was really bad. And by the way, the timing couldn't be worse for her campaign, because this is a time where Trump has a lot of momentum right now, politically speaking. I've done a lot of work in my home state of Pennsylvania. That's the one where I'm really focused on, although I will be in North Carolina later this weekend. I'm doing the Clay Clark event down there this Saturday. And it's a huge testament, I think, to how much Trump has been through, the fact that he is so competitive and in fact winning in national polls, even after all of the things that he's been saddled with, that she has now gotten so desperate that, I mean, look, she's going on Fox News. This is not something that we saw Biden do. This was not something that you would see Barack Obama do back in the past when he was running. So she is in a very, very desperate place right now. And that is why she's begging for these debates as well, because she's trying desperately to change the momentum of the race. And this interview it did change the momentum. What it did was it accelerated it for Donald Trump.
Some people are saying that this interview with Brett Baer was akin to the Trump Biden debate, where you actually saw the mask fall off and you're like, this is an old, senile man who cannot string 3 sentences together. We've heard that Kamala is horrible on a microphone. She's not good in front of crowds. She can't put together, like a 3 essay thought on a microphone. Is that this moment now for Kamala? Do things, like you say, escalate, snowball after this? Or does they kind of put her in the basement like they did Biden 4 years ago and just kind of say everything's Trump's fault and keep her out of public view?
Well, I think there's a number of things they can do. I expect with her campaign being run by a lot of political neophytes the way it is, with the exception of David Plouff. So you've got Jen O'Malley Dillon over there, who was previously running Biden's campaign, which was largely corporate run. You've got David Plouff, who is from the Obama era. But again, she's been listening to people like Tony West, her brother-in-law, who's not someone who's ever run a national campaign, or her sister. So he's the husband of her sister, Maya. And Maya West, her sister, was the senior advisor to who? Oh, that's right, Hillary Clinton back in 2016. And people don't even know this, that Kamala's sister was one of the top advisors for Hillary all the way back in 2016, working directly with John Podesta. So when you have a situation like that, those are the people who said, don't choose Josh Shapiro, who's a guy from a swing state like Pennsylvania. Don't choose Mark Kelly, who's a guy from a swing state like Arizona. They're the ones who made this disastrous pick of Tim Walz. I expect that you will see them try to find some other desperate move, some other desperate media thing that she can do. She talked about going on Joe Rogan, so we'll see if that happens. She talked about, again, trying some other type of debate, so we'll see that. But at the same time, will it change the election? I don't think so, because people have already, or is there anything she can do to change the election, I should say? I don't think so, because people are already voting in states like Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in Arizona. The voting has already begun, because we don't have a voting day. We don't have an election day anymore. What we have is an election season and a counting day, where election day is now no longer the day that you vote. It is the last day you vote. As a matter of fact, I've already voted in the state of Pennsylvania. And so I think that the momentum, if anything, as people are going to the polls, it's really, really bad, because there's not much else you can do to persuade people one way or the other. But what you can do is depress. And so if there's anything that this does, I think it's going to depress her side. And that's why you saw the Kamala Harris sycophants going out yesterday all over X, all over social media, and then all over MSNBC and CNN, and basically saying it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. She's fine. Make sure you go out and vote, because it wasn't that bad. She did fine. There were a few moments, but it wasn't that bad. She did great, as a matter of fact. They're terrified of this depressing their side, and they're looking at the ballot printers in Detroit and in Milwaukee and in Atlanta and in Philadelphia, and they're saying, you know what? We don't know if this is going to be enough. We still need the momentum up there, because they don't have the mail-in ballots that they had in 2020 going back again. In fact, I just got a report coming out of Georgia that I was looking at right before I came on air here that said that Fulton County, which is where Atlanta is, isn't even one of the top counties in Georgia for early voting yet. This is a disaster in the making for them, politically speaking. Now, I'm not one of those guys who says, okay, it's time to sit back. And, I think polls are for firefighters and strippers. So I'm not going to be thinking about them. But what I am going to be focused on is making sure that we win. And I'm going to be busting my butt all throughout North Carolina and Pennsylvania for the last 2 weeks of this thing.
Amen to that. Yeah. Let's pivot here and talk about their strategy, because clearly they're going to have to distance them. Kamala's going to have to distance herself from the last 4 years, and yet she's part of the problem. Now, another way around this is violence, political upsets, etc. So I want to pivot to that, and I'm getting a notification. Zoom's only going to give us 10 more minutes. So I'm going to try to upgrade while you're talking, but can you kind of, how does that?
Or I could sign off and come back if that's if that
true.
works too.
That's true.
Yeah.
What other shenanigans? You got the book Bulletproof coming back. We've had 3 attempts now. Is there going to be another attempt? Is there going to be violence? Is there going to be some surprise that comes along? What's your take?
Look, after this interview that we saw I think that we live, and let's just take it back for a second. So, do you believe that we live under a regime? Well, when we live in a situation where the president of the United States, the sitting president of the United States, and we detail this in the book in Bulletproof with inside reporting from the White House and the inner workings of the Biden campaign, which go all the way back to July, when I was talking about how Barack Obama and Michelle Obama worked behind the scenes to get Joe Biden out of office. A lot of that's public record now, but we've got information in this book that has never been revealed yet. Also, information on how Tim Walz, as I was just talking about, ended up becoming the pick. He was also an Obama got pick. He was an Eric Holder pick. That we go through and we learn that our government is not the government of the people that we can see. Do you really think Joe Biden is in charge of our government? Do you really think that Tony Blinken and Kamala Harris and these people who are up there, they're actually making these decisions? That's why Kamala Harris can't answer any of these questions, because she doesn't have any of the answers, because she isn't the person who made the decision. All right. We have control by shadowy elites, by power brokers, by special interests. They are the ones who pulled Joe Biden from office. This is why Joe Biden, by the way, has been undercutting Kamala Harris every step of the way since he left, because they are the ones who are really making decisions, not him, and certainly not her. And so, what have they done to try to stop Donald Trump up until this point? Well, first, they tried to censor him. They took him off all social media. That didn't work. Then they tried indicting him. They raided him. They raided his home. They raided his wife's personal laundry and her drawers and her undergarments. That didn't work. Then they convicted him in New York City of a ridiculous charge that nobody even remembers. By the way, they impeached him twice along the way. That didn't work. And what have we seen now? A series of targeted assassination hits. Oh, I see the meeting has been upgraded. Now includes unlimited minutes. There we go.
I just put in my credit card and upgraded my Zoom account.
There we go. There we go, baby. So we've seen a series now, though, of targeted political hits, and they've up until now been failed hits. Hit jobs out on President Trump. And no, I don't mean political hit jobs or media hit jobs. I mean the real kind. I mean the old kind. I mean the Gambino kind. And so this is what's going on, is that you have this individual, Thomas Matthew Crooks, there in Butler, Pennsylvania. And I traveled to Butler for the second rally and did site surveys there and research for this book. And the second individual, Ryan Wesley Routh, who's directly tied to, oh, what did we find? So I found I have a access to a proprietary AI device where you can put anyone's picture in and then scour the entire internet to see any images that they may have been in, video, social media, etc. Plug them in, and within minutes, we find Ryan Wesley Routh is directly found in a video propaganda for the Azov Battalion, which is a neo-Nazi battalion in Ukraine that's been involved in what? Oh, assassinations across the border in Russia, and even assassinations of political leaders that they believe were not sufficiently pro-regime. And so when I see this guy who's down outside the West Palm Beach Country Club and golf course there with Donald Trump lying in wait on the 6th hole while Donald Trump is on the 5th hole after the first assassination attempt has taken place, it leads me to believe that, well, there were more of these out there. The hit is still active. And let's not forget as well that what did Ryan Wesley Routh have in his possession, which the DOJ then put out? And by the way, you know, when the government wants to censor a document, they blacken it, they redact it, they put everything together and say, oh, you can't see this document. But then there was a letter that Ryan Wesley Routh wrote that was an open letter, as if we're in some kind of John Wick movie, that said, I was not able to be successful in my assassination, but perhaps somebody else will be. And so I am putting forward a $150,000 bounty for the head of Donald Trump. And the DOJ released that letter to the public. Now, what I've been able to report from my own sources, my own investigations, is that $150,000, that's not coming from this guy. That is coming from a pot of money that is out there. And the way to think about this is that these various assassination teams, and Congressman Matt Gaetz came on my program a couple of weeks ago and dropped that absolute nuclear warhead that said there are 5 assassination teams actively targeting President Trump. They're competing for this bounty in real time. So it's not, will there be more assassination attempts? It's that, will there be others that are successful? There are active threats to him right now. That's why, if you notice, Donald Trump has getting no media attention whatsoever. He's requested military support, military aircraft, military convoys, because they have lost faith in the Secret Service. And how can you blame them after two assassination attempts happen right under their noses? And they want drone support, they want the infrared, et cetera. They don't trust federal law enforcement. They're hoping that if they can go to the military, they may get a little bit more support from there. But do I expect more assassination attempts? Taylor, the assassination attempts are happening all the time. There are stuff that we don't even know about that hasn't even been made public yet, talking about drones with explosives. Again, a tactic that we saw and have seen to great effect in warfare on the battlefield in Ukraine that have gone on that we're not even told about happened here. Again, IEDs and drones. What did we see Thomas Matthew Crooks using? He had a drone and he had IEDs. Now, he didn't combine them, but he very easily could have, because there was no drone infrastructure set up from the Secret Service that day. And so the folks who think that he was acting and did all of this completely by himself, and that this other individual gets all the way down to West Palm Beach with an unregistered serial number shaved off SKS Kalashnikov rifle, which coincidentally is, of course, the same type of rifle that you find all over the battlefield in Ukraine, was acting as a lone gunman, then I've got a bridge in Baltimore that I'm going to sell you. So this is an active situation. And so one extra thing that we've done with the book, with Bulletproof, is that we've gone to another level of saying, I don't trust the federal government either. And I don't trust what the FBI's put out on this. We've seen Chris Wray lie. He said that Trump wasn't even shot. He said it was shrapnel that came from the teleprompter that hit him, which obviously wasn't true. Another FBI agent, by the way, in the course of investigating this, we found there was an FBI agent who went to one of the witnesses and told the witness that Trump wasn't shot, and said, no, 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 his head hit the podium and that's what made his ear bloody. And then he went to the ground. But when you can see in the video that that's obviously not what happened. And again, so you've seen the FBI spreading absolute lies about this. So we said, look, we don't trust these guys. What did we do? We've hired our own private investigative firm. They're going on, and they're fully licensed in Pennsylvania and the rest of it. They're on the ground right now and continue on the ground Bethel Park, PA, where the first shooter lived, as well as up in Butler, PA, where the shooting took place. They're doing the shoe leather research and investigation that the Secret Service and the FBI are not doing or are not interested in doing. And they're releasing our own private independent investigative report on this situation. That report, which, by the way, includes the designs on these IEDs that I've been talking about, that are not the common IEDs that you would find. It's not a pipe bomb. This wasn't even a pressure cooker bomb like we saw with the Boston bombers. These were sophisticated devices, remotely detonated, had the ability to take out that car, potentially could have taken out the entire parking lot, which was clearly what his intention was. He did not build those things by themselves. We've uncovered evidence that he may have been testing these things along with other individuals. So the first iteration of the preliminary investigative report actually is in this book. And what we're doing is that we're using the proceeds of this book to start something that we're calling the Bulletproof Project. And there will be other iterations of reports that come out, because the investigation is ongoing. And look, as we were writing this book, the second attempt took place, and this guy with ties to Ukraine, this guy who was also, by the way, traveling around Istanbul and Taiwan and all these places, like he was on a CIA field trip trying to find these foreign fighters. Well, if I've got to send investigators to Ukraine, then I'm going to do so. And so the Bulletproof Project will continue, and then we'll be issuing updated reports and potentially new versions as this goes on and as the active threat goes on, because we believe that by digging into the truth about what happened in Butler and what happened in West Palm Beach, then we can try to figure out what is exactly going on and what will come next.
Yeah. And people can see the book on the screen. It's Bulletproof. And, we had breakfast a few weeks ago, and you showed me the cover, basically this one, and I assumed it would be the famous fist up, fight, fight, fight. But it's actually the one with President Trump on the ground. So share with us why you chose that photo as opposed to the one that's more well known.
Right. So everybody remembers the image of Trump with his fist up, but we decided to go in a different direction, and we'll tell you why. And people have seen images of Trump with his fist raised before. This isn't the first time we've seen that. People have seen all sorts of images of President Trump, but there's one image of President Trump that you've never seen, or at least you hadn't seen prior to this day. And that was an image of President Trump publicly in front of a crowd on his knees with his hands in front of his face, as you can see depicted in the photo, appearing as if he's in prayer. And this is the moment just prior to him standing back up on his feet, because I believe in, as a Catholic and as a believer, I'm someone who believes that in that moment, Donald Trump spoke to God, and really God spoke to Donald Trump. Because as we know, that there is one thing that God asks of his leaders. There is one thing that God asks of those that he uses. And that is something that, look, Donald Trump has a lot of talents and a lot of unique qualities and characteristics, but I don't know that humility is something that I would really put on the top of the list of the man who has more buildings to his name and his name on them than I think anyone in the world. That God asks us to be humble. Humble yourself before me. Show piety. And if you will not do so, then perhaps I will make you do so. And in that moment, God humbled Donald Trump, and Trump showed piety. He prayed, he listened. And it was in that moment of the divine intervention. And I noticed that, and when I was watching the videos, that this happened at 6:11 p.m. And I put this tweet up that's now gone viral saying that, well, we know that Ephesians 6:11 is put on the full armor of God that you may stand against the schemes of the devil. 6:11. And then immediately after Trump accepted the humility, that's when he gained the strength to raise himself back up to his feet, to throw his fist in the air. And even as bullets were flying, even as he was in a situation where he didn't know if there were other shooters or if the shooter was down or if the threat had ended. Think of it. You've never seen this in a movie. You've never seen this on the battlefield. You've never seen this in a law enforcement situation where someone would actually come up while the bullets were still flying and stand up and raise himself to his fist. And I would submit, and this is the reason that we put that as the cover, that it was in that moment that Trump truly accepted God's guidance. And that's when he gained the strength to be able to raise himself to his feet. And what have we seen since then? The public embrace of Christianity by Donald Trump. And he's invoked it in ways, invoking St. Michael, by the way, by posting Our Lady of Guadalupe, and of course his first tweet or his truth post immediately after the shooting. It came the next day, and he said unequivocally, the 4 words that he said unequivocally in that post: "It was God alone that saved me. It was God alone." And that is not something that Donald Trump usually says. That is not language that you usually hear from Donald Trump. And now, of course, do I wish that he would go further in some of his public embraces of Christianity and Catholicism specifically? Sure, it hasn't been perfect, but you have to say that between 2016, 2020, and 2024, this has been a massive change in his public outlays. And I really do believe it was in that prayerful moment that God reached out directly to him. And that's been the change that we've seen since then.
Yeah. You had to stop production of Bulletproof, right, when the second attempt happened?
Oh, yeah. So I actually got to use the phrase, I actually got to literally use the phrase "stop the presses." It was kind of fun. Spending money on that was not fun. I realized that when you stop, it's actually very expensive to stop the presses, as it turns out.
Yeah.
Because you've already been printing something, and so when you decide that what you've already printed has now has to get turned into pulp, the publisher does this great thing called making you eat the costs. So that was not fun. But I said, look, there's been another attempt on Donald Trump, and we need to fix this, and we need to put this out, and we need to get this information in. And so myself and Joshua Lysek, our co-author, went in and we spent basically I said, give me like 12 hours. Just give me 12 hours is all I need. And we had to scrap a couple thousand covers because we changed the entire cover, which is, of course, the most expensive part of the book, other than the binding. And just page by page, the most expensive. And anyone who's done books knows that. And we changed the subtitle. It was originally a little bit more about Joe Biden, but now and the book has a lot to do with Biden, but now it's the truth about the assassination attempts. That little S cost me
Yeah.
so much money
That plural.
to get in there. But whatever. Yeah, whatever. It wasn't, it's not about the money, and I'm not really even interested in that. And I'm looking to find a good to charity to even donate the proceeds of this to, because I'm just not interested in the funding and certainly using it for the investigation. And honestly, the family of Corey Compatore, they deserve answers here more than anyone, because
Right.
they lost, and I met them at the second Butler rally. They lost their father. A wife lost her husband. They were not able to go home with him. He gave his life for them in that final, ultimate moment. His last words were, "Get down," to his family. And he covered them as a father does, as a husband does. And everyone knows this, that a true father, a true husband, and of course, in scripture, it says this, husbands must cherish their wives. And what does this
Yeah.
mean? This means that why is the father the leader of the household? Because the father is the one that is willing to sacrifice everything for the family. And
Yeah.
that is understood. And that is a classical, it is an ancient sense. And the fact that Corey Compatore was able to do that is incredible. But at the same time, his family and his daughters deserve answers as to what happened. And so, yes, we did have to scrap a whole bunch of covers, but we were able to get that second chapter in, and even on the back cover, we were able to get a picture of the second assassin, because it's very important. I think that with the second failed hit on Donald Trump, we understand that this thing is much bigger than anyone wants to give her credit for.
Yeah. My worry is that it might happen again before Election Day, or these will continue to happen for the remainder of the term of Trump. And that's raised a lot of questions for people about JD Vance. Is he able to step up? Do you think, two questions here, do you think that we could continue to see not just a season of attempts, but years of attempts? And then where does that place conservatives, Republicans, with regard to JD Vance and the future?
Well, of course, look, yes. I mean, the answer to all of that is yes, unless he is able to enact some sort of security plan or have some kind of security force that he can trust, that he can really trust. And when it comes to JD Vance, I would say that JD Vance is certainly someone who is now also facing these threats. JD Vance has young children. Donald Trump, by the way, massive family, just
Yeah.
absolutely massive family. And so he's got his son, of course, is now going to school up at NYU. So a very public, very obviously public university that anyone knows about. Everyone knows about this thing. I've been told Melania Trump was very upset when all this happened. She was very worried about Barron. All of his grandkids, by the way, very young grandkids. Eric and Laura have young grandkids. Don Jr. has 5 kids. And so Tiffany is pregnant. Ivanka's got 3 kids as well. And so I would say that this is a situation where, unfortunately, because of this situation, they are all facing threats, and they are all facing real threats, because and we do have a section where we go into the motive here, and we talk about how there are trillions of dollars at stake, and people point to the military industrial complex, and that's clearly tied to the national security agencies, and obviously one of the biggest factors. But I would, and certainly with the Ukraine tie, but I would also submit that when you look at the situation with the illegal aliens, the migrant crisis that we're seeing, that it's actually a migrant operation. And people need to understand that, because you've got massive amounts of money, billions of dollars riding on the line for these companies that have enacted these policies where TPS is essentially a free flow of low cost labor to many of these companies that are going into areas like my hometown of Norristown, Pennsylvania, or places like Springfield, Ohio, or Charleroi, Pennsylvania. And you can find towns all over the country where this is done to. And what they're doing is they're turning the Rust Belt into the refugee belt. And guess who makes money off of that? Well, multinationals are able to make tons of money off the middle. Then you've got government programs involved. You've even got, and I have to say it, you've got, I believe, organizations that falsely use the name of religion, like Catholic Charities, as well as Lutheran charities and Jewish groups that go out there and say, "Oh, we're here to help the refugees and welcome them." But you look, and they're actually left-wing organizations that are masquerading using the names of these good religious organizations as a sort of skin suit to be able to go in with these operations. And so, again, you've just got billions and trillions of dollars on the line should he come back into office and actually enact any of these policies. So, are there threats? There absolutely will be threats. Look, JFK went up against the national security state, and you look what happened to him. By the way, with McKinley, who's someone that President Trump has mentioned a number of times, that McKinley is someone who was a huge trade populist and was someone that was very pro-tariff. He was also killed by an anarcho-socialist back in 1901. That's what led to the Teddy Roosevelt being our youngest president. And so, I certainly hope that that is not how J.D. Vance becomes our youngest president, but is it in the cards? I think it's something a lot of people should be thinking about. And we even include in the chapter, just to finish your question, that we include a section that's sort of a what if, and we ask the question, what if that bullet on that fateful day, July 13th, 2024 at 6:11 p.m. had been 1 inch to the right? What if? And essentially, you would see a quasi-civil war situation. You would certainly see domestic unrest. There's no question. You would see people being very angry, but then you would see the federal government come in with a massive crackdown on Trump supporters, on conservatives, on religious. Essentially, what you would see is what Merrick Garland, the DOJ, have been doing to J6ers and have already begun doing to pro-lifers and to TLM Catholics and to anyone who's involved with apparently praying the Rosary. You would see that a nationwide crackdown. You would just see an absolute nationwide crackdown on Catholicism, on traditional Christianity, and anyone being a Trump supporter. So what they did to the J6ers, you would see J6 crackdowns nationwide.
Yeah. We have a few minutes left. I really want to encourage everyone to pre-order Bulletproof. Jack Posobiec just had a New York Times bestseller on humans this year. He's back with another book. And if you want the definitive book on the attempts on Donald Trump, this is it. It's titled Bulletproof. There's a link to it in the show notes. You can pre-order it. Pre-ordering is always best, so please do pre-order. Don't wait till it comes out. That way you get it right in time. And I want to close with a question about Catholicism and Donald Trump. You're a Catholic. I'm a Catholic. My audience is majority Catholic, though we have all kinds of evangelicals, Protestants, other people, but mainly this is a Catholic audience. And I think Catholics have been sort of spinning in circles, like, oh, he posted St. Michael, Our Lady Guadalupe, happy birthday, Virgin Mary. It's not just that he's posting Christian messaging, it's explicitly Catholic messaging. And we've seen some evangelicals sort of boo-hoo that. But then we've also had a little bit of disappointment with Melania and her statements on the A word and some comments by Trump on women's reproductive rights, et cetera. So I think there are certain people who want to sit out. They're like, I don't want to choose the, quote, lesser of two evils. Is he really pro-life, et cetera? And so as a Catholic, speaking to Catholics, how would you address their concerns?
Yeah, sure. And this comes up all the time. By the way, my brother and I have been we've been going to a lot. Basically, what we did is we went to Latin Mass, sort of the Latin Mass Finder website, and we've just been going to pretty much every Latin Mass that we can find all across the state of Pennsylvania. And we even this last Sunday, I went to 4 masses, one in English, 2 in Latin, and 1 in Polish, because we were actually at the Polish National Shrine there at Our Lady of Czestochowa in Doylestown, which I know you know. And this question comes up a lot. It just comes up a lot. And I say, look, you've got one candidate that is posting Catholic phrases, that is going out there and already, by the way, appointed 3 Supreme Court justices that struck down Roe v. Wade and have given us a fighting chance for Catholicism and for the pro-life movement on the Supreme Court, by the way. And I understand, there's people who say, I want the entire pumpkin pie from Donald Trump on this. And he said, well, he's not giving you the pumpkin pie, but he's giving you all the ingredients to put the pie together on a state by state basis. And I understand that. And we know, by the way, at the same time, you're not just electing Donald Trump, you're electing a team. You're electing the 5,000 people. That's the way politics works. You're electing the 5,000 people that will be running the federal government. That's how it works. So you have the president, then you have his various appointees. Obviously, we know the cabinet, the vice president, but there's also those lower level appointees that go into the agencies. Now, just on a real talk average basis, do you really think that those aren't going to be pro-lifers? Of course they will be. Of course they're going to be. The vast majority of them are going to be pro-lifers. Then on the other side, you've got a candidate who is directly opposed to Catholicism, who has spoken out against the Knights of Columbus, which is probably the most, I guess, vanilla Catholic men's charity group that exists. I mean, these guys are, they hand out the coffee and donuts and they do the blood drives. And, I'm a Knight of Columbus. And, it's probably just the most benign service organization that you could find associated with Catholicism. But she called them extremists. And she said that if you're even a member of the Knight of Columbus, you shouldn't be eligible for appointment in government.
Yeah,
so you've got someone who's
she treats the Knights of Columbus
to you.
She treats them like, or the KKK. It's like in her mind, she thinks the
Yes.
Knights of Columbus are wearing white sheets, riding around on
Because she hears
draped
knights.
horses.
She hears knights.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, the Knights of Columbus. They're like, you mean like the ushers?
Like
the guy who's like,
donut
the guy goes,
guys?
hey, I got 2 seats, got 2 seats up front. You need 2 seats up front, we're good to go. Like, that's the Knights of Columbus. And hey, we got donuts and some fellowship afterwards in the, in the parish hall if you want to stop by. You're not forcing anyone to swear any loyalty oaths to the race, which interestingly enough, if I know we don't have a lot of time, but the Knights of Columbus were expressly set up to protect Catholics from the KKK back in the 1800s. Right. But of course, nobody wants to actually look at the real history of the situation. Of course, Columbus Day, we can't have that either. So the invoking Columbus, that's another big no-no right there. So if you've got someone who's willing to work with you versus someone who is expressly opposed to you, then I don't know what to say, because if you want your children to be living in a country, this isn't about the next 4 years, by the way, it's about the next 40 years and perhaps the next 400. Because if you want your children growing up in a country that's controlled by godless, Marxist atheists, where children will be sent to schools, or by the way, they'll dismantle the Catholic school system, they'll dismantle Regina academies and the classical schools and the magnet schools, they'll get rid of all of that, and they will push people and push children to go to government school. And in those government schools, they will be taught the Pride agenda, they will be taught the BLM agenda, they will be taught pronouns and trans and all of these things. That is what will happen. They're expressly saying this over and over again. And so if you want that for your children, then please go ahead and sit out the election, because that's what will happen if Kamala Harris gets in. But if Catholics are involved in this election, then you've got a guy who, yes, he may not be perfect. You know who else wasn't perfect? Saul, King David, or pretty much everyone else in the Bible other than Jesus Christ himself. And so you've got a guy who's very much willing to work with you and has, by the way, an incredible chance of actually winning and turning things around in this country. So that's my pitch when it comes to Donald Trump. And if that's not good enough for folks out there, I'd say go look at Harrison Butker, because he says I support him for the exact same reasons.
Yep. Excellent. Ending with Harrison Butker. I like it. Kicked it through the uprights.
I will throw out, you know what? I'll even throw out one more on the IVF question. This is something I get all the time, so I'll address it because I'm sure everybody wants me to talk about it. Is that one of the things that I'd love to see Catholics sit down with President Trump on, and I don't know that he's done a specific Catholic sit down, but I'd love to sit down with questions on the IVF process, because the real issue that Catholics and the pro-life movement in general have with IVF is the destruction of embryos in the current process as to which the IVF is carried out right now. But there are other options for those embryos, and embryo adoption is actually something that a lot of pro-life groups do. It is something that they call, I believe, I don't want to get it wrong, I think it's called angel babies. And they say, this is something that embryo adoption exists, and embryo banks exist for this. So I think opening that up in the same way, by the way, that there's pro-life pregnancy centers, I would love if we could find a way to end the destruction of these embryos. And I think that's really something that Catholics can talk to Donald Trump about, and perhaps get him to upgrade his idea on, and to teach him that there are new technologies out there as well that don't call for the destruction of the embryos.
Right. Or just promote adoption straight out,
Well, yes, and yeah, obviously, right, yes,
Yeah.
yes, and
Yeah.
regular adoption too, of
Yes.
course. It goes
Yeah.
without saying.
We don't
Yeah,
have to go into the labs to get beautiful children, sons and daughters. There's all kinds of options out there. Well, thanks for coming on. I want to encourage everyone. The link is on the screen. The link is in the show notes. We'll put the link in the comment. Bulletproof, the truth about the attempts on Donald Trump by Jack Posobiec. And if you want the book on it, this is the book. And how many days are we now to the election?
We are 19 days away.
19 days.
So 19 more days of voting, because remember, we don't have election day anymore. We have the end of the election day. So I've already voted. My parents voted. My mom voted before me. Can you believe that? My mom voted before me. And I'm like, what a disgrace. What a shame. Like, I'm like Mr. Political guy. And my mom's like, I voted today. I'm like, what do you mean you voted today? Because they have this loophole now in some of the states where you can go in and request a mail-in ballot and then turn it in immediately. So you just vote early in person.
Well, I haven't voted yet, but I'm going to vote. So, and I'm going to vote.
We're trying to generate that FOMO, that fear of missing out. FOMO.
Yeah. Got to vote. You got to get out there. So, I'm going to vote. And I hope this was helpful to people as we, tackle controversial issues, especially from a Catholic point of view in the Catholic community. And I'm going to encourage everybody to get the vote, get out there and vote, and get the book. Also, just today's sponsor is Real Estate for Life. If you want to move out of a blue state and move into a red state, go to a place with a traditional Latin Mass, Catholic schools, conservative community. There are people ready to help you. It's called Real Estate for Life. They'll set you up with an agent where you are or where you want to go. They'll help you sell your house. They'll help you find a house. It's a wonderful service, and dozens and dozens and dozens of people in my audience use it every single month. So if you're interested in purchasing a new home, selling a new home, I encourage you to go to Real Estate for Life. It's realestateforlife.org, and make sure you tell them that you heard about it at the Dr. Taylor Marshall podcast. Jack Posobiec, I want to thank you for coming on. Thank you for writing this book, and thank you for all that you're doing for the United States of America. I was going to actually be part of a meeting with Donald Trump on Monday, and I had to cancel because I have a funeral of a very close, dear friend. I'd ask everybody to pray for Lisa, who passed away this week. Beautiful woman, 12 kids, I think 30-something grandchildren, confirmation sponsor to one of my kids. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful lady. Died with her whole family playing the Rosary around her. And so I won't be able to meet Donald Trump. It's a bummer, but it is what it is. So I'm glad to see that.
Is that the one that's down in Charlotte?
Yeah, that's the one.
I'll be at that.
You'll be there. Dang, I would have been there with you.
I will be there. Yeah, so I can convey your
yes, very much, because I think Ben Carson will be there as well.
Yep.
And Eric.
Ben Carson, Eric Trump, and President
yeah.
Trump. And I think Jackson Laymeyer is putting it all together.
Yep. So I was very much looking forward to that, but I have something much more important to attend to, and that is the funeral and mass of a good friend. But anyway, I'm glad to see that Trump is meeting with people and continuing to keep his ears open, and I think that's a good sign. So thank you so much. I think we should sign off. I know you're a prayer warrior, rosary warrior, Latin warrior. I think we should sign off with a prayer in Latin. I'll give you the option, heads, tails. You want Our Father or Hail Mary?
I'm in a Pater Noster kind of mood.
Pater Noster. All right, I'm going to put the words on the screen, and everybody can pray with us. Oremus. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Pater Noster, qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra. Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, et dimite nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos dimittimus debitoribus nostris, et ne nos inducas in tentationem, se libera nos a malo. Amen. nomini Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Jack Posobiec, there he is, strapped.
There it is. St. Michael Rosary, by the way.
Strapped.
Right
I
there.
love it. I love it.
I've handed rosaries out now on this year to Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, Russell Brand, and most recently to RFK Jr.
I gave one to Candace Owens via George, and I gave one to Tim Pool. And he had it hanging. He had it hanging behind him on his show. For a while.
Tim is one of those cradle Catholics who's sort of drifted. So we gotta work on him.
Back.
We gotta get him
back. So he was very respectful about it. Tim Pool's he's like, what should I do with this? I was like, we should pray it. He's like, well, where do I put it? I was like, just put it somewhere prominent, So he hung it up behind him. So yeah, rosary.
Or at least have it. Just have it.
It's the weapon. We got to get everybody strapped. So get those rosaries out there. All right. Jack Posobiec, thank you. Everybody go buy the book, Bulletproof, The Truth About the Attempts on Donald Trump. And remember, our Lord Jesus Christ is you're the light of the world and the salt of the earth. So go out there and be salty. God bless. Godspeed. Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, yeah. God bless, man.